this session will be useful to you and hope you can make use of these concepts and also you can learn from this session. About me, this is Sekar, and don't try to check the spelling of my first name. We don't use H, but we call it as a we spell it as a without H, but pronounce with H. So all my friends who are from abroad, if they struggle to pronounce my name, I ask them to remember the milkshake. So that's a shake, the shaker. So uh, thanks all. Today the session would be uh, like sensitive data protection. This is a solution we have prepared and which is based out of it's in D365 window. And about me, I lead Microsoft Dynamics practice for Wipro, uh, and I have around 20 plus years of experience. I worked most of the versions of the Dynamics, and also initially I started my career in Navision. So today we talk about this solution. So let's directly jump into the solution. Here is my contact information, and anyone wants to reach me, as well as I will share my LinkedIn profile sometime later. So let's jump. So first of all, what is data and how it's relevant to D365? So we simply understand like data, which is a raw information we get anywhere. This data has to be processed to infer something that becomes the information. Once information is synchronized and collated, then that gives a knowledge for us to take a decision. And which also gives insight about the company or the business where it's going, and which the founding stone for the vision of the any entrepreneur or any going concern to define the future strategy. So this is a typical how the data works, but let's find out how this happens in Dynamics. Say if I try to correlate with the Dynamics, the simple entries like a debit and credit, the numbers, these are the data. Once it's become a sequence of transactions, I'm able to make this statement using these numbers. It's a payable or receivables or outstanding, then it's become information. Using this information, if I'm able to make profit and loss account or statement, then that gives about my business, how I am doing, and what is going well and what is not going well. That's become the knowledge about my business. And if I make a trend, how I performed last year versus this year, last quarter versus this quarter, that gives an insight. That nothing but applying patterns and which helps me to define a vision. So that's where the data is very important, and we work with the data on daily basis. So move further, how the data grow. Long time before the ERP comes, people used to have a paper or some kind of spreadsheet to save this data. And they felt there are systems required which you should store the data. So that was the application and database came into existence. Now, how it's related to F&O? So before the ERP, there was different applications which used by many corporates. Say typically one was used for doing the inventory management, other one used for so typically on the purchase and sales. Then they felt they must have a system combine this information. That is a founding stone for any of the ERP, which is a MRP. It's a material resource planning. Then they also felt this mostly used by that time the industry revolution started. All the uh, manufacturing industry start using this, especially the car companies and accessories companies. They were the need of this kind of system, and it's massively used by them. And once they felt the MRP, it's not only going to help them, they should combine with the production. That's what they think of the MRP one, which is nothing but apart from MRP, it's a capacity resource planning. Then the great word coined, which is a ERP. Then they felt this kind of data has to be combined and become a one system so that we can do planning and make the resource available across the system, across organization, across the department. And like now the D3 is called it's enterprise application. That means across the global. So that can be used and optimally utilized. So that's a founding stone. Now, what happens, which also creates a lot of regulations. So typically we heard about GDPR, that is for Europe, and also HIPAA, that's for medical industry. And if somebody did the implementation for China, they would like to have a own database within the boundary. So we started where separated database, and slowly we are moving to separated database with the constraint of having a ERP. So that is an industry challenge, what we see across the globe. And it's not only for D365, which happens to all kind of ERPs. So what is a problem in D365? So the problem is we have all the data, and especially sensitive data. So what are these sensitive data? Typically the employee master. So I'm going to use this example for whole my session. So this is one of the typical problem. Say we know about GDPR, so I can't take a data of somebody in Europe and store it in any other country. Say employee master of organization stored in D365. If it's a cloud hosted, we don't know where this data is storing and how we are going to meet the GDPR compliance. And especially when we do implementation, during the implementation, we get the data from the customer, and the customer may be from different geo, and the implementing partner may be a different geo. So typically now, if you take this case, I'm from India, but people are across the world accessing the data. And I can't share any of my personal data or any of one of you personal data in this call. But during implementation, we can't bring all the people at one place and do the implementation. But at the same time, we have to achieve it. So typically the master data of employee, nothing but date of birth and disability, racials, gender, especially the financial data like bank information. And people like, if you go to US, you have other informations like related to your tax return. This kind of information you can't share to any partner or other persons. So that is for the partner, and similarly for the payroll data, which is a compensation bonus. And assuming you have an implementation team and you work with a key user, definitely the key user not a CIO, as well as he is not a head of HR. He may be a key user and doing some managerial position. But during implementation, he has access to see all the data, all the salary, including his CEO, and across the company he's going to access. So that is the biggest challenge we saw. And not only that payroll data, it's a customer data too. Say when we give the customer master to the partner, implementing partner or the support partner, so they have a full data. So there is no system to restrict that. It's applicable for vendor too. And the era of where we have a temp worker as well as the specialized organization we acquire to do some kind of work, which is nothing but third-party logistics or the third-party warehouse. We would like to expose our sales order and purchase order, but not to disclose the sales and the purchase price, which is very sensitive. I may give different discounts for different customers. I don't want my warehouse team should know this. Either it's an internal team or external team. And finally, the manufacturing data, which is a heart of any business. If it's a processing industry, the formulas or bill of material or the route, these are typically the very sensitive data, and they want to keep it inside Dynamics and with restricted access. Now, the simple definition how it goes is any data which required different access, different permission to access the data, that becomes sensitive. So we're going to control this. See, first, before we say how we are going to control, let's understand why we have to control. In some some country, there are legal statutory requirement. It has to be controlled. Say HIPAA, which is nothing but data privacy, which governs the medical industry, and we can't expose most of the data. Similarly, we know about GDPR. The example what I told about China. Any sensitive data, we can't have it. We should have a database inside China boundary. So that is a need and we can't avoid. The second is privacy and ethical. The privacy, nothing but our customers are giving their personal data to us, believing our company will protect that. And we should ensure it should be given to right hand. The trade secret, which I talked about, formulas, bill of materials. And finally, if I miss, what will happen? I will lose my brand image and it will going to spoil my reputation. And of course, it's a huge penalty. So that means I must protect this data. Now, let's find out typical use case. Say, when you do implementation, your key users part of the team and the internal IT user part of the team. When they upload this data, example, the payroll, what I talk about, they know everyone's salary. They know everyone, the personal information, married, not married, the gender or disability. These are the information they know across the world. And also the key user, even though they are not from the say HR department, and being a key user, he may be having access. So the third party warehouse I just talked about, implementation partner. And the challenge here is as a global partner or in place, and the companies are globally working across geo, it's impractical for any customer to have a different implementing partner for each country. So they are forced to use very few partners, and they located either one geo, say example, Americas. He may be based out of America, but he has to access data of Asia or vice versa. So that's become a challenge for the company itself. And AMS. So this is a sure stop bigger problem actually. Surely has to be addressed. In this case, all production data we are giving to AMS team, and that is not required. They have to just need some kind of data, either fix it or do analysis and give a bug or repro the bug, or they want to give some fixes, which does not mean that they need full data. They may need a record, but not a data. So how are we going to handle this? And what is Dynamics gives? Let's move there. So F&O Dynamics, we have a lot of options. We all know the security rules. Yes, we can have a security rules, but the challenge here is once I give admin access to a person, E can see everything. So that is not solving the business problem. So next option is record level security. This feature also we have it in Dynamics. The challenge here is it gives access to a record. That means I cannot see other department record, other location record, other person record, but it's not stopping me to see my own record or my own division or department. And that means that data may have a sensitive data. So this record level security also doesn't solve my purpose. Then we do have a field level security. So, field level security, we all know it is not straightforward. It's a cumbersome process which required developer intervention. That means coding. So it's a next to impossible to put the coding for all the data and also having a code written especially for this. And finally, time-bound access, which is not an option in Dynamics, which typically required for auditors. They come for a week, a month, do auditing, or the temp worker, they come for data entry. That is also not there. So having said this, we defined what is the need by the industry, and also we know what is available in Dynamics, how we're going to fill this gap. So in our solution, we have defined the whole problem into two. One is during implementation. Second one is during the support. So during implementation, what it means, the data must be available in the same way without damaging, but it should not be visible. So that means we have to mask it. So we use an option to mask all this data and given the permission to only the restricted people. How it works in Dynamics. Say we created a group and this is a complaints group. And this group we can keep on creating as per our need and depends on the compliance or depends on the industry standard, we can define that. Then in this group, we can add user. So this is specialty what we made. So we understand the challenge. So default what we made is all the users, including admin, will not see sensitive data. So that means a default no one have access. So if somebody wants to have access, he should be added in this group. So here in this example, we've added a one of our team members saying this person going to have access. Fine. So I define the group. Now I have to go and say what data I should mask. We can start creating the groups, the configuration for masking, where you can see I can have a multiple group IDs and also I can have a description which is required for us. And this can be attached to a permission group, the roles and response group for just to be created. Now I have option. Do you want to do randomize and masking? So being a production environment, I don't want to touch the data. So I just want to do the masking. Once I say masking, then I have to tell what are the entities. So here I'm saying a third party postal address. It's an entity I want to have a restricted access and restricted permission I should give. Similarly for logistic postal address I have to give. Oh, I can go further in this entity, what data I want to mask. I mean, say this entity and this is a field, I can keep on adding a field. So this other field, I can give access to that person so he can see the value. Otherwise they won't see. So being as a masking, I'm not defining this parameter. I just say the data is masked. Now let's see how it's going to work. So I keep on adding other fields like in that one, either I want to mask address, city, state, and keep on adding it. It's a fully configurable. They configured. This is a typical access of admin user. It's a typical access of admin user. So I'm admin user. I can't see this field, and it's a fully masked. And the permission what I gave to the person, that person can see normal way other people can see. So here you can see the address is masked because I told my solution saying this, hey, these are the sensitive data you should not expose to anyone. I double click and see other forms. That's also restricted. What I mean is you keep on drilling down up to the last level. You're not able to see the data. And if you're trying to export this data to Excel or any other parameter or any other application, which is masked, and you can't do it. Similarly, if you try to open a report, this report are restricted. You can't access. So by doing this, the production environment fully secured to any kind of data leakage, especially sensitive data leakage, and including the admin resource. So that's why we have protected our production data. And the same thing we applied during the implementation so that the data is not accessible and including the implementation partner. Now come back to support period. When they say AMS, which is a application maintenance support. So in this case, what happens is they need data for doing a testing. And typically this happens during implementation for SIT or UAT also. So they need data. I can't mask it. At the same time, I can't give actual data. So we use a concept called randomization. How does it work? Say I go to again my group. This time I use randomization. So once I say I can also keep on adding the entity, how I did the previous way. And in this place, I'm adding my HCM personal detail. And here I'm saying a marital status is one of the sensitive data, so don't show. So that means this data are required, but at the same time, I can't say actual data, so I have to randomize. So I'm using my dummy value and say here the one of the thing is disable the fixed value we are using it. So what is the importance here? Say example, here we are using a standard drop down value of dynamics. So that means we are not creating any custom code, custom data here. So we're not touching the architecture. And similarly, either date of birth or email ID, we are giving dummy values. So which means that the data is just available, but it's not sensitive. So once I said this, and I can go back and set the parameter, which is I say everyone is not disabled. So you can go and see the final solution. So you can see all the masters of employee, which is typically populated with the dummy value. And this dummy value can be modified based on our requirement. Example, I can auto generate dummy value and populate. And if it's a drop down, I can choose that drop down. And if you don't have data, and system also gives option in our solution, it gives option which will typically generate and removes the actual values. So that way it solves a purpose both the implementation partner and support team, as well as the SIT or UAT, which all done without impacting the sensitivities of the project or the data. So if you see, I keep on saying different resources. the data is same. So because this is all standard data. So now, having said this, how this is works. So the solution is based on the most of the modules of Dynamics, starting from GL, project accounting. All the places can be applied, and both the concept of data masking and data randomizations is applied on the user interface level, especially on the masking and randomizations at data level. So within quick time, without any coding, this can be used and implemented for any of the projects, and without compromising the demand of data. So this is salient features. It works real time. That means the masking happens when you access. No more much code return. That means which not impacting your application or data or performance kind of thing. And it's easy to configure. Just I told like just to go and add the tables, fields, entities kind of things. And you can also choose any of the option. Either you want to do masking, randomization based on your need. And finally, it's a zero coding. So what are the benefits we get out of this is using the randomization and masking. We are protecting our data privacy and saving the cost and time, because we found most of the time when we want to upload data, team travels to the project site and there they have to get the data and access because of the sensitiveness, and that kind of cost and time is saved. And yep, so this is a team, innovation team. Some of the people in the call, they helped to innovate the solution, and Kiran is our architect, Nishant technical consultant, Mathura, and it's me, Shekhar. So let me pause here. Any questions?
Hello, thank you, Sekar. Okay, so are there any questions? Okay, here we are. We do have a question by Faik, who's asking, can we mask sensitive data but show it again to certain users, security roles? If yes, can we apply this to a subset of records and not columns?
Okay. Yeah. See, actually, what we have done is this is a one first release of the product, and we are adding more and more features. Say, as of today, this we are not done this, but we will add this. Yeah, we we can't do now in our solution, but we can add it. Any question? Any next question? Okay, so I can see next question is admin can still adding itself to different user group, right? Yes, he can do. He or she can do. That is a one more control we are trying to bring, and which is we like admin is admin, correct? But in our group, we are going to maintain the log so that if the admin try to do it for short duration, come back, we will trace it, and that gives the log so that if anybody wants to know tomorrow who the person accessed for short duration, that can be traced down. But the point here is, as admin, he can do anything, correct? Say if I give admin permission, I can do anything. But the 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 discipline what we're trying to do is, being admin, you should not have access. That's a discipline they have to maintain it. But yes, answer to your question, yes, he can add it, but we don't suggest the person to do that, and he should follow his the what do you call the company policy or process. And if somebody does it, then that is not acceptable. Can the solution used as a replacement for raw data record level security? As I said, record level security is there, and it is not the replacement, because record level security, what this gives is that if you're two different type of records, and if you're two different set of people, the first group has to access A record, second group access B record. That's where it gives us. So let's take a group E, and the group one and access record E. In that record, you want to hide some information. The example initially I said, talk about compensation. Fine, that's easily everyone can understand. Say I'm in India and I do our office, I mean Wipro has office across the globe. So if I maintain the HRMS application and I do maintain for the Europe, so that means I do access to all the Europe data. Record level security is applied. But I should not see specific data in that record. For example, I should not see the salary of my boss or my boss, second level, third level, and related information. So that's not possible using record level security. So answering that, it is not the replacement, it is a supplement to that. Yeah, is it available app source? We are listing in app source, which is more or less ready. You can connect with me offline and we can tell you the date when it's available, or we can find out how we can work if it's required. Very soon you can find an app source. As I said, this is the first version of the solution, and subsequently we have other releases. So much more feature going to come. Yeah. You can ask a question. We have another 20 minutes. I kept it very short and sweet so that we can have an interactive session. So can we use the data entity to export this configuration as a data package? Yes. So our next solution is we are coming with the industry specific. Say if I go for retail, what are the data has to be masked? We're going to give a standard package and you can go and export. Similarly for health, similarly for government, and also module specific, retail, supply chain, finance, and that's all on the cards. And country specific, like a China, we were thinking, but we are not there yet. But yes, answering to yes, you can export this configuration. Will the masked data will reflect if the user edit in the Excel or Excel connections? Okay, as I said, what we did is we have blocked the Excel import, Excel export of the data where he doesn't have access. Even the report we restricted. So say example, I have a compensation. Again, I'm using compensation that's easy to understand, correct? So say I don't have a compensation data, but if I go and run a report, I can get all the data, correct? And if I export, I can get it. Or if I write a code to the integration application and make a one file, flat file, I can get it. So this all we are restricting if this solution used. So answering your question, Vijit, that's not possible in our solution. Of course, it's a configurable, but we feel the data, if you don't want to give it, the person who does not have access, he will not able to export this data any format. Is a solution also, the next question, is solution also applying masking on data extracted from data entity? Yes, yes.
Okay, whilst we wait for other questions, yeah, I've got questions. So the question would be, as per kind of GDPR requirements, often the database sometimes comes under question. Is the encryption happening at database level, or is the masking happen at database level or at application level?
Oh, okay, Raz, that's a very good question. So the masking is planned for protection. So we in our architecture, when we discussed, we thought we'll not touch the production data because again it's a cloud and other part. So we are just masking at the database level. We are not touching it. So at the database level, being the cloud environment and don't have access to data. So that's the assumption we made. So we don't need to touch the data. And you can ask a question, what will happen to on-prem? On-prem, this solution still not ready, but the cloud version you can use. And answering your question directly, if you use masking, it's only at the user level, not on the database level. However, if you use randomization, it's on the database level.
Interesting. So just from a kind of a GDPR perspective, I'm trying to think, because you've already got the database level encryption, right, at SQL level. So if database is being replicated at a SQL level, but you've obviously got the masking at application level, you've got the masking and randomization working. Just from a GDPR perspective, I'm trying to understand how well it, because as you know, there's you've seen the Microsoft 5 layers of protection, right? And that's often what we use to customers to show that a solution is security compliant. For this particular solution, I'm just not sure, 100% sure what happens at the SQL level. For example, if an admin, for example, has obviously access to the DB, and has the key to the DB, then obviously that data is available, right? So yeah, I think that's my only question, just purely from a GDPR perspective, really, from a compliance. If what to understand the technicalities there. But I don't know, Sekar, if you, because you've obviously built this solution to address that problem. So I'm not sure if you can share any insight around that.
Sure, Raj. Let me try to share, but as I said, database level is a still challenge. We the first version it's not addressing, but we have many use cases. Okay, so this is one of the use cases. How do you want to do it? Yeah, we can touch base offline, Raj.
Here's a question by Vijesh, who's asking, when it comes to ESS, we would want the employee to see her own data in the, is this supported?
Yes. So again, it's a combination of our solution with the standard. This can be achieved. Yes, it's supported, Vijay. Yes, answering your question.
Okay. So whilst we wait for some other questions, yeah, I mean, how difficult is this to configure? There's a lot of data within F&O, and how would you go about configuring the access?
What our plan is to give a package which is ready-made configured, so that the user has to just add the extra data required. So first thing is, as I shown, it is similar to how we configure our security rules. It's the same way we have done it. So you define the user group and keep on adding tables and fields. Fine. And to make the life simple, we were going to give a ready-made package. You can just import as a configurations, and module wise we try to give as well as industry wise, so that the basic things are available and you can start using it. I see somebody also posted. Yeah, Okay, great.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you return the blog. That's great.
Sekar, I mean, would you like to show how you'd configure the rules or whatever? Since we've got so much time, I think it makes sense to show, because if an organization is going to implement this, then they need to be able to maintain and manage the rules, right? Someone's going to be responsible for doing that. And
okay. So first thing is we are defining the groups for, let's go with the masking first. So this is the first configuration. We can keep on defining what kind of groups we want to keep it. So typically these groups can be module wise, or if you have a industry wise. So that's a two kind of business requirement we saw most of the places. Fine. So we can define a group. Once we define a group, we are adding the user who need access. So what it means is only this user have access, and this is a user part. Fine. Then let me go to the product configuration part. So in the standard, you have access to all the data, correct? Now I want to restrict the data. So here I can come here and add my entities. Fine. So here I'm saying is this is a group I want to use for data masking. Fine. And what are the entity I want to add it? So example, we given third party and the logistic postal address, the two entities. And as I said, we do have a pre-configured entities. Fine. So say postal address and the logistics postal address. So in this entity, what data we want to restrict? If we go back, so this is a third party postal address. So here I can keep on adding the fields. So in this table, what are the fields required? I can keep on masking it. And this data won't be available. So that's the only configuration required. So the first level, I have to say what the entity, and each entity I can go and configure what is the field. So if I go to next entity, so this is a logistic postal address, this entity, and I can keep on adding these fields. So this only configuration you have to do that. And once you've done it, these fields are masked.
there's a question by Ian asking, do you have any support if data is shared in data lake, as you have CSV and derivative views in Synapse SQL that need security coverage also, including tables as well as entities?
As of today, we focused only D365, not Azure Data Lake kind of thing. And of course, as I said, this has to be restricted for the integration also in the future. Say someone can write a code and extract the data, correct, with admin permission. So yeah, as of today, that we are not thought through, but yeah, we can think in the future.
Sekar, the way people are doing it at the moment is we just run a SQL script, right? We run a SQL script on the DB, and then it solves all those problems. It solves the problems of the integrations. It solves all the problems of security with a SQL script. So could you kind of share that the differences between doing it via a SQL script versus doing it this way?
SQL script. Okay, so in production, when you do a SQL script, first thing is if in the cloud, you will have a less access to run any of the SQL script. Correct, Jazz? So if it's on-premise, you have full feature. Fine. And again, the SQL script, which required the person to write it and do it. So not it's driven by any of the admin person who doesn't have the technical knowledge. So here it is in the backend. If it's even though it's controlled by SQL script, but it's a configurable. So any admin team or any support team or implementation team or internal IT team, they no need to think of writing a code. So that's a major difference. So being a cloud, you are a lot of restrictions. You're not able to run all the SQL scripts.
Sorry, Sekar. So you mentioned production, right? So, so the main use case that I see is mainly across, say, non-production environments where you want to secure the data, right? And that's the approach we take. But in production, what scenarios would require you to mask data where the security, you may have covered this already actually, but which scenarios would you need to use this in a production environment where security isn't sufficient?
Yep, that's a good question. So as you understand, correct. So the SQL script will be for non-production mostly. So the typical use case what we saw, I do have a customer and he is a ERP manager. Any tickets which comes for HRMS, he is the only person fixes across the world. So he comes back and say, the only reason I fix the tickets or any analysis I do it, or repro I do it, because my team member should not have access to this data. So that's a typical use case. So if we give the solution as per him, if we able to mask some sensitive data, say example, again I use the same example since the beginning I'm using the payroll data. If I able to mask the rate and the salary which is paid for the employee, and this information, this ticket can be given to L1, L0 person. But being is a manager, he has to fix it. He doesn't want to give the control to any of the team member. It gives all kind of which spoils the confidentiality. Correct. So that's a one use case we saw. Second use case what we saw is the different team, which is nothing but you have a third party warehouse and they have a team to sometime maintain the inventory and also restrict the data or price, but they want to expose the sales order without the price. So in this case, we can use this feature. That means I will expose a full sales order module to them, and full means you'll have read permission, but the price is masked. So that's a second use case. So this is the typical use case in production visa.
Sekar, another question from my side. You should set up typically on the addresses and contact details. Is the solution in fact working on any entity, any fields out of the box dynamically, or suppose if I have a custom table, what would be my prerequisites to use it in your solution? Is it directly working, or should I first develop a data entity, or should I call some logic from your solution, or how does it work?
Okay, so we use this one for the standard solution, and the custom solution we have to call our logic and enable your code. So if we create any of the custom entities. Yep. Did I answer the question?
I'm not fully getting it yet.
Okay, so custom entity, yes, you have to access our code and enable in your custom entity to apply this logic. So my code works only on standard, by the way.
Okay, so that means that every entity you want to include, that needs to first call your coding before it can be used. Okay, so that means that out of the box it's not available for all data entities, unless you do some additional coding on it, some extension.
Yeah.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you.
It'd be great to hear some more like use case scenarios from a security perspective, Sekar. It really would. There's a yeah. For example, could you kind of share different scenario? I know you've covered it a few times, but to be honest, Sekar, it's not. I've not really truly been able to follow the scenario that you mentioned. Are you able to kind of go through some of those scenarios where you'd need to, certain scenarios where it just so that we can understand the use case, the complete use cases for this, so if you could discuss a few more scenarios where you would need to mask certain elements of data in production, that would be really, really helpful.
Okay, say I will go back and show the business challenge. So this is a base for our solution. Okay, so one of the scenario I can say is if you don't want to disclose the employee personal information, which is nothing but your age, date of birth, email ID. Okay, that is a typical scenario most of the customer asks, correct? And this is the information which is only maintained by the core HR, and when it's go for payroll and when it's go for the supervisor and they access some data of employee master. So this masking can be used. Say one more option is like appraisal rating. If you appraise rating for all the employees, correct, and you don't want to show the appraisal rating of other team members to the manager, that can be restricted. Say you are two sales manager for say North and East, and both the managers have equal access, and you don't want to show the rating to this manager, this can be masked. Or you can take one more typical examples. Fine. Yeah. Say, yeah. You ask me something?
Oh, go ahead, Sekar. Sorry. Yeah.
Typical example is we do have a typical say order entry team. Fine. So the order entry team does most of the orders getting entered, and when it's go for further processing and approval, so that time the price and other data getting updated. The basic information, price and discount not given to the typical order entry team, and the price discounts decided by the salesperson. So that's another example we saw. So the call center or data entry operator, they do basic data and they don't have access to the information, even though they have a full access for sales order. That's another typical example.
Thank you, Sekar. Okay, a comment by ESAT saying innovative approach for data protection. Thank you for sharing. Amazing.
Thank you.
Okay. So we've got 5 more minutes before we move on to the next session. Any other questions? And to be honest, Sekar, a few years back, this is actually a key area in the other Dynamics applications as well, where when GDPR kind of came into an enforcement. And to be honest, a lot of us ended up developing solutions similar to this actually across, say Dynamics CE or other types of solutions. So I think I can, yeah. And the way it was done was because it's a cloud solution. The PII data would get masked by at runtime. So at runtime, it would basically on every retrieve of the query, it would then perform the masking at that level, and it would run under the user's context. So that's how we built it. That's how we developed it in say Dynamics customer engagement, for example. So yeah, so there are certain scenarios. Definitely, and yeah. So is this the first solution of its kind for F&O?
I think so. I'm not sure. Before that, answering that question, Raz, yes, we also initially, we thought this is mostly for GDPR kind of thing, but all our projects, I should say, most of the customer asked, I want a solution to not to disclose most of the data. So in spite of GDPR, in spite of other complaints, because that's one of the ask we have seen. And answering your question, other part, we have tried in the app source to similar solution, but we're not able to locate. So that's the reason we thought let's develop in-house and use for our projects. So that's why this whole solution come into place. But till now, I didn't see anything in the app source.
Actually, I know there are partners having their own solution also offering to customers. And I don't know the names by heart, but in fact there are some, but I don't know. I have never looked for those solutions on the app source, so I don't know if your solution is the only one on the app source or not.
Yeah.
But
maybe there, but yeah, and you may be correct, but I didn't see if it is there. Yeah, it should be something similar to should be there. But
okay,
yeah, when we tried, it struggled.
Yeah. Great last question by Benjamin. Any suggestion on purging personal data in D365? So I'm assuming, Benjamin, when you say purge, actually, what you mean? What do you mean purge? Because my understanding of purge is you'd run a script, right? You'd run a script. So if you could just further emphasize, Benjamin, exactly what do you mean by purge? In which environment? In dev environments, in UAT environments, in production? If you could just kind of further elaborate, that would be helpful, because Sekar's obviously shown this solution that masks the data and randomizes the data. So here we go. So Benjamin is saying we use SuccessFactors, which has a purge function for employees who left. Okay, employee data, right? Okay. No, that's fine. It's not off topic because it's I think it is related actually. We're talking about data here, and so it's definitely a part of the topic. So purging in production, purging data of employees who left. Sekar, do you have any thoughts about that?
So Raj, it's a question. You asking something? Your voice was breaking for me.
Yes. Do you have any thoughts about purging employee data who's left the organization?
Okay, see, actually, purging is, again, this is a very hot topic. We were trying since 3.5 version of AX. We want to purge our data. And employee, Benjamin, honestly, I tell you, employee data very less. If we talk to retailers and product master, they keep on adding product every season. They want to purge the data. We tried a couple of options when it was on-prem and using SQLs, but after D365, we are not successful. If any one of you guys have some kind of thought, let us know where it was successful. And in my view, this is one of the untouched area.
Thank you so much once again,
Benjamin. So to add on that, an employee record can't be deleted. It will create an expiry date for that worker, but also Anna can confirm that. So if a person insists of removing his record, you have to obfuscate the data. Change something to be not readable or invaluable. That's for the workers part.
Anyway, our
Okay.
next topic is for HR, and she can answer it on the HR module.
Okay, guys, thank you once again, Sekar. And I know we obviously tried to take it to the full end, and we have successfully. There were lots of great questions. So Sekar, thank you. Thank you for sharing your insight. That's been really helpful. Okay, fantastic.